Stacey Blackwood. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is Strength and Conditioning on the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Stacey, we haven't got a chance to talk in a while. First of all, I want to get your opinion on last week's game against Western Kentucky, 63-0 victory for the Tide. What were your thoughts on that?
Just real quick, it's hard not to come away really impressed for it to be Kalen DeBoer's debut. It kind of started off a little rough, not only with the whole headset situation from Western Kentucky side. You could tell that kind of that did not go over well with Coach DeBoer. He was not happy about that. Then you have the issues with Caden Proctor getting injured in the pregame, and it kind of shuffling the offensive line. And then there's a play, and I think on the first series where both Booker and Brailsford lose their helmet. So there was just a lot of chaos, I guess, to start the game. But after that first drive, it was really just Katie bar the door, and Alabama just dominated Western Kentucky. I thought Milroe played well. The backs obviously played well. Big running plays from Haynes and from Jam Miller. Ryan Williams showed that he can be a special talent in this offense, a big playmaker. So I think you got to come away impressed offensively, and then just defensively, it just really blew me away with the way they were able to just fly around the football, making plays in the backfield, creating turnovers. Keon Sabb with 2 picks in the first half. Just really impressive performance from Kane Womack in the defensive side of the football. A lot of faces like Quay Russaw, LT Overton, they really showed up. Jihad Campbell was, I don't know that he's not the best defensive player in the country. If he plays that way week in and week out, you could certainly make that argument. So I think you have to be excited about how they looked. Of course, it is Western Kentucky, and it'll be important to kind of keep the pace this week when they welcome South Florida into town.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. It's just maintaining, and it's interesting because it's like a slight step up as far as like the opponent, right? Obviously it's group of 5. Some people are going to call it another cupcake week, but USF presents a lot of challenges, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about, is just previewing, Alabama versus USF and kind of what to expect. And especially once you get last week to kind of figure out, okay, this is what Alabama is going to be trying to do. Granted, you don't exactly know if like the rotations is going to continue to be that much, or did they get some things figured out? Do they start settling on some guys, or you seeing a bunch of different bodies rotate in? That's great from like a keeping everybody fresh, especially defensively. But it's just we don't know one way or another. There will be rotation for sure, but just how much? Will it be as much as we saw in the season opener? That remains to be seen. But this game last year against USF, obviously it was not a very wasn't a good moment for Alabama, and there was a lot of factors that went into that. The quarterback battle was causing some controversy, amongst the entire team to an extent, just trying to get settled in on that. You had the weather was not good at all. You had a weather delay that threw a wrench in things. But and if I'm not mistaken, Tyler Booker didn't play in last year's matchup. So, one of your best offensive players misses it. So, just what are your thoughts on that? We're about to get into previewing this year's matchup, but kind of want to get your thoughts as far as maybe riding the ship, or how are your feelings on last year's matchup and kind of how it's affecting how you view this year?
It's almost like Alabama. This is almost a revenge type game for Alabama because of how poorly they performed defensive side. Now, the defense last year in this game was incredible, giving up just 3 points to a team who scored a lot of points last year. So defensively, that was impressive, but the offense was just poor. There's no other way around it. They had to make plays late in that game in the second half to pull away to earn that 17-3 win. So despite winning the game last year, it wasn't the type of performance that Alabama is accustomed to putting on the field. And I think guys like Tyler Booker, Malachi Moore, those veteran leadership type players, and then the Jalen Milroe point of it is, hey, this is the game I missed out on. And it's like another chip on his shoulder, another pivotal moment in his career where he can kind of slam his fist on the table and say, hey, it's different when I'm the quarterback. So, despite getting the win, it's almost like a revenge type game for Alabama from my point of view. Now, if the players are looking at that like that or not, I don't know. But from a fan's perspective, and from 1,000-foot view, it feels like a revenge tour almost for Alabama.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if Alabama played Louisiana Monroe in 2008, right?
Oh yeah,
And I mean, obviously a much better football team in 2008 than it was in 2007, and that would have played a part. Obviously, USF didn't beat Alabama, so it is different. But it is one of those. You get an opportunity in front of your home crowd. You went on the road and played them there last year to kind of right the ship, and it, Alabama has long since gotten back on track from that game. I mean, last year they did, but just the perception of playing a program like that, which, USF has a good program. They've
Mhm.
continued to build, been really impressed with what they've been able to do the last couple of years. And it kind of starts offensively. Byrum Brown is such an interesting player. Their starting quarterback. Obviously, a lot of his success is going to come on the ground. He's definitely a volume type runner. They're a volume run team, just in general. They got a stable of running backs. They use all of them. The quarterback's going to run quite a bit, and then they're going to play off of that. And that's kind of what they, to an extent, tried to do last year. And they had a lot of success doing that in other games. And, Brown was able to escape on a couple of plays and have some success with his legs. But, he's coming back. What I find it so interesting is just the amount of starters that they have back on offense, really on both sides of the football. But more importantly, I was looking at it. 9 of the 11 starters on offense right now, Stacey, 9 of the 11 are graduate students.
Wow.
One of the other ones is a senior, and then Byrum Brown is a junior. So their entire team is littered with guys who have been in college for a very long time. Now, that's a much bigger deal in college basketball, when you've got those veteran teams. But at the same time, it's really not going to be none of these guys are going to go into this game and the moment's going to be too big for them or something. And especially because a lot of them ended up transferring from other places, like their left tackles from Tennessee, their center played at UCF for several years, right guard played at Colorado, right tackle played at Houston. So not big programs for the most part, but these guys have played in a lot of big football games as far as having to play these types of games, and so that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I think that's the first thing that jumps out to you when you look at this USF team is the fact of all the returning players they have on both sides of the ball. And on offense, it does all start with their quarterback, Byrum Brown, who's, we use the term dual threat, almost loosely now in today's college football. But, with Alex Golish as his coach, the dude knows how to throw the football and make plays through the air. But to me, his biggest threat is still with his legs. And like you mentioned, he is a volume type runner. He's going to get, probably 10, 12 carries per contest. So that is something to watch out for. And I want to say he rushed for over 100 yards against Alabama last year. I didn't look at the box score from last year, but I felt like he had a couple runs in that game that kind of, they obviously couldn't turn into touchdowns, but he did have some breakaway runs in that game. So he is a volume type runner who can make plays. They're an experienced team. They brought in a transfer receiver who's probably their number 2 target from Purdue, a really talented playmaker. It's 6'2", over 200 pounds. They like to get him on one-on-one matchups. So that they have playmakers on the perimeter. They have a solid running game, and they just, like you said, the moment's not going to be too big for them because they're of their experience level, not only at USF, but also you mentioned all the transfers they have from other programs that are, not only from the group of 5, but some Power 5 programs as well, or Power 4 now, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Abdur Rahman Yassin.
Yeah,
I had to
I was
actually,
going to let you say it. I was going to let you
yeah,
say it.
well, and I normally butcher it, but I saw that name and I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to look that one up. So Abdur Rahman Yassin. I don't know how well I'll do saying that quickly, but that yeah, he is a good player. Led the team in catches and yardage last week against Bethune-Cookman. Averaged 14.6 yards per catch. He's a good player. He is kind of that bigger body guy, 6'2", 203. And really, when you look at Sean Atkins, who was kind of last year he had, I want to say, close to 100 catches. He had over 1,000 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns. More of a, he's a slot guy, going to be a volume player. He's not going to average a ton of yardage per catch. I wish I had the number in front of me, but, he's probably going to average, 10, 11, 12 yards per catch.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah,
crazy.
11 and a half yards a catch last year.
Yeah, well, that falls right in line with the quick math in my head based off of those numbers. But it, I thought that he's kind of a safety blanket for Byrum Brown, and he's going to be one of those guys where when Brown, uses his escapability, create some on the move, he's going to find a soft spot, sit down, and he's going to be open a lot. And so that's kind of where that chemistry has been built from. But you got him back. Got a bunch of different tight ends. What's interesting about their offense, heavy 11 personnel based off of last year. Not a lot, just a ton of pre-snap motion. You're obviously going to get it, but I didn't notice a ton. But you are going to get a lot of play action, a lot of RPOs. You're going to get the deep shots, from that Tennessee style of offense, a lot of design quarterback runs. Last year, at least, they were very between the tackles as far as their run game. So it's an offense that can really present some challenges. And just like Tennessee's offense, which is where Alex Golesh comes from, he was at Tennessee in 2022 when they broke that streak against Alabama. And then he gives Alabama, I wouldn't say the offense really gave Alabama's defense fits. It was more of their defense that gave Alabama's offense fits, which was more Alabama, in my opinion. But,
yes,
you see that same style of offense where they're going to kind of spread you out and, try to find space in the passing game, the wide splits, doing all those different things, stacking the receivers, a lot of the same challenges. They're going to try to do some of that stuff. And Alabama's got to be prepared because, their secondary right now, even though I thought it played really well against Western Kentucky, it's still, at least on the perimeter, it's still pretty green.
Yeah, and another thing that's kind of got my head spinning is how fast is USF going to play in Bryant-Denny? Because last year they were the fastest teams in the country as far as number of plays ran per game. I think they were. I had it wrote down, but now I can't find it. I think 79.6 plays per game is what they averaged. So that's a lot of plays. So how fast are they going to try to run things in Tuscaloosa? Does it look different on the road versus at home? So that part's interesting. And like you mentioned, with Golesh coming from Tennessee, he knows what it takes, but now it's different because this is a totally different scheme defensively, what Alabama's running compared to what it was under Nick Saban. And caught a little bit of his Alex Golesh's press conference from yesterday, I believe. And that's what he talked about is, hey, I've seen these guys the last 2 years, but it is a completely different team now. I mean, they're totally different offensively and defensively. So not only from a personnel standpoint, but obviously schematically. So how they choose to attack Alabama, with the weapons that they do have on offense is going to be interesting. And do they try to run that hurry up style of offense to keep Alabama from, like you talking about, subbing all those players in that they tried to last week?
Yeah, and that's an interesting angle. That's certainly something to look at because if man, I don't know how to approach this because you look at the offense. It's like Alabama was scoring a lot. Like if this was the old Alabama, it's like okay, if your defense is out there a ton because because Alabama's grinding out long sustained drives and scoring touchdowns, and then you go out there, you try to go hurry up, and now next thing you know, you've gone 3 and out pretty quick. I mean, you're putting your defense right back out there, but Alabama was scoring really fast last week. That they're going to be putting up points. So it could, in USF's mind, it could be, hey, let's try to get this kind of into a track meet. Obviously they're looking at any way that they can win. And I would be curious to know what that approach was going to be, but you make a very good point on, if you're going hurry up, their ability to make a lot of those substitutions, maybe that's something that we end up seeing. And I will say against Western Kentucky last week, once again, you didn't have that cheetah package, but you did have that package where Jahad Campbell slides down, plays an edge opposite Quandarius Robinson, who's not the best run defender. And then you got James Smith, who's more of a, He was playing some, drive by drive stuff, and I actually thought he did better against the run than I was expecting. He's further along as far as the run stopping stuff than I was expecting. But then you had Jamarian Latham as an interior pass rusher. There was some situations where Alabama was in that style or that package, and then you bring Justin Jefferson on the field where Western Kentucky is going, they're hitting you with a surprise run on 3rd and 8, and then they're going hurry up to force you to stay in that package. And now they're it might be 4th down, but they're in a favorable situation as far as the down and distance of what Alabama would want to have on the field versus what Western Kentucky's got on the field. So that's something to look at as well, and to keep in mind from Alabama's perspective. Who are some guys that maybe you're trying to keep an eye on this weekend? Obviously, a lot of the defensive players going against that offense, but you can also talk about a lot of the offensive guys versus USF's defense.
Well, I'll stick with defense to start things, and I want to watch Jahad Campbell again because that dude was so much fun to watch against Western Kentucky. I want to see how he kind of can he replicate that type of performance again this week against South Florida, because I think that would be huge in Alabama's success defensively. Obviously, the secondary continues to be something that I'm going to focus on because of the youth and the inexperience that they have. I thought the way I do like though what you have at safety with Malachi Moore, who's more that physical in the box top player. And then you have Keon Sabb, who's just, he's just floating around back there in the back end of that defense and just tracking the ball and making plays on it. So I think that's a really good combination. But so watching that secondary, watching what Jahad Campbell can do, and Quay Russaw as well, kind of up front in that front seven, because his ability to just be an all-around player, at this stage in his career, I don't want to say I'm surprised because we heard a lot about him in fall camp, but he was even better than what I thought he would be in that first game last week against Western Kentucky. Not only against the run, but ability to. I mean, he got a lot of quick pressures in pass rush situations. So watching, the secondary, Russaw and Campbell the most, and I guess I'll stop there. I'll let you tell me who you kind of focusing on defensively, and then I think we can kind of transition to the offensive side to see what Milroe and them can do and company can do against South Florida.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think Alabama fans, at least some Alabama fans, realize the degree to which Tennessee caused them problems in 2022. Sometimes it gets simplified to it was a Jalen Hyatt problem. It was a Hendon Hooker vertical passing problem. And it was really so much more than that, because those opportunities were available because Alabama was trying to do what it could to limit all the other things that Tennessee was doing well, including the run game. That was opening up a ton of opportunities. Alabama was trying to get guys over the top, go too high, and do what they could to prevent the vertical passing game. But every time they did, Tennessee's like, if you want to take guys out of the box, we'll burn you, because we have the offensive line that can run move the football. We got a couple of really good running backs in Jalen Wright and Jabari Small, and we'll just ride those guys. And so, when you look at that style of offense, what made it so lethal was they had the ability to capitalize when you adjusted. When you started trying to creep up DeMarco Helms a little bit, put him in kind of a no man's land where he can get up and help, try to be an extra defender in the box. But if they press vertically, he's trying to get back. But against Jalen Hyatt, I mean, he's at such a disadvantage. But that's kind of what they were doing to kind of position themselves and get a lot of those explosive plays. When you look at USF's offense, they have a Hendon Hooker type of runner for sure. And I think that Byrum Brown is a good passing quarterback. I don't think he's nearly as dynamic as Hendon Hooker, though. I don't think he can take advantage to the degree that Hendon Hooker was able to on a lot of those things. And you had, Hendon Hooker's legs, and you got Byrum Brown's legs. So that element of it, I think they'll try to run the football. They're always a volume running team. But Alabama is going to present them some challenges. And if they want to have consistent success offensively, they're going to need to be able to capitalize on some of what Alabama's doing to adjust. And that's where things get interesting, because, I don't necessarily know that USF's got those types of players, that caliber of player. So we'll have to wait and see. But for me, it would be stopping the run. You got to be able to contain the quarterback. That's really kind of a committee thing. But, the Wolf, a lot of times when it's playing off the ball, as that shallow linebacker, he's going to be kind of, quarterback spine a little bit, kind of doing a Harold Perkins, LSU versus Bryce Young, a couple of years ago. And I think that that's something that you might see quite a bit of. The other three have to be able to apply pressure, but it's really about keeping Byrum Brown in the pocket and making him beat you from there. And I think that ends up being really important. So Russaw is really important. I think a guy like James Smith, the fact that you're going to have some passing opportunities or some pass rushing opportunities, I think he's going to, if Alabama can win the early downs, put them in unfavorable down and distances, I think a guy like James Smith, the interior of their offensive line, it's good for group of 5 standards, but I think that it's also, you've got some guys that can exploit it too.
Yeah, that's the front is going to be huge. You brought up that Tennessee game from a couple seasons ago, and one thing that really hurt Alabama in that game is the fact that Tennessee's offensive tackles were able to completely take Will Anderson out of that game. And so it really changed the dynamic of Alabama's defensive approach, I think. And you mentioned Tennessee's ability to run the football. That really changed the game. And Alabama had no chance to stop them with their inability to stop Tennessee's run. So that really hurt them. The early down and distance, which is something you talk about a lot on here, is winning the early downs. Tennessee won the early downs in that game, and that is what led to Alabama's downfall in that matchup. So it'll be important again this week. And you mentioned South Florida doesn't quite have the offensive line that Tennessee had back in 2022. So I feel better about that going in this game against South Florida than I did against Tennessee in that game. But in terms of what Alabama has going for itself offensively against South Florida is, first of all, think about last year scoring just 3 points, or excuse me, scoring just 17 points against South Florida when they averaged giving up 36.5 points per game last year. That's just incredible to me. That just shows you, and I don't want to take anything away from South Florida and the way they played defensively in that game last year, but the Alabama offense was a complete train wreck. I mean, from the first snap until they, left Tampa, that offensive, the game plan, the execution, it was all just piss poor is the only way to describe it. So I expect Alabama to not only have a better game plan, they obviously have more continuity because, like you mentioned in the intro, the fact that the QB controversy was going on, I think there was some tension in the locker room. I think there was a lot of, some guys pulling one direction, some guys pulling another. And I don't want to talk about guys not giving full effort because, that's not fair because I wasn't there in that huddle or anything like that. But there was definitely, I guess, some division amongst some of the players. And I think that was obvious in terms of the quarterback controversy. So I think there's more continuity. There's more chemistry. I think there's a better team dynamic, I guess is the best way to put it, going into this contest this year compared to where it was in game 2 of last year, or game 3 of last year, excuse me. So I do think offensively, Jalen Milroe is obviously a much better player than what Tyler Buckner was. No offense to him. And I think offensively, Alabama has just a little bit more weapons, more explosive type weapons than what we had any of last year. So that's also important to remember. So I do think that offensively, you're going to see a little bit more than 17 points in this contest against South Florida. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Yeah. I mean, when you're talking just, the fact that the game's at home, the fact that, the system that Alabama's going to be playing with, the fact that you're settled in at quarterback, you know what you got, you know how to win with it. Yeah, there's no doubt. I would be floored if they scored 17 points again. One thing I want to kind of talk about because, and I was trying to go back and look at the numbers because I couldn't really remember, off the top of my head. I know that against Texas A&M in 2021, one of the big problems, this is when you kind of have this 3-4 based defense, it's 3-4 principles. that star position is kind of your other outside linebacker. So your jack and your star are really your two outside linebackers. But what you do with that star, he's playing obviously as a nickel. But a lot of times you can walk him up on the line of scrimmage. You can, have your guys kind of shift to a 3-man front, and then you've kind of got that 3-4 look with your two inside linebackers. But what that means is just how you kind of handle that when you put that guy, that inside man in motion, and he goes across the field, that the star is going to walk up on the line of scrimmage, essentially become the jack, and the jack is going to, drop off the ball. Obviously, he's not going to be able to do as good of a job, that what he's responsible for at that point is a little bit different. But what Texas A&M did is they completely took Will Anderson out of the game plan because they kept motioning and forcing him into coverage in those passing situations. And I think Alabama realized, I don't remember how exactly they adjusted. I want to say Tennessee did a lot of that too, but I don't think Tennessee used motion as much. And there was, Darnell Wright, that kind of is what got him to be a first round pick, was that one game against Will Anderson. So we had a lot of great reps. It wasn't really scheme based that, took Will Anderson out of the game. But I want to say that happened a couple of times. And that's kind of all it takes. And that's the difference in kind of what Alabama's doing now is you'll see like a lot less of that. And so I think that's really, really important and a huge difference as far as I think it gets Tennessee's style of offense, which, is UCS style of offense. I think Alabama is a lot better equipped nowadays to play against those styles. I don't know how well, they might not, they might suffer some against the Georgias of the world, but, against the Tennessees, I think they're actually better equipped to handle it. And, we'll just kind of have to wait and see how that ends up working out. But, shift the offensive side of the football, like you were talking about, I do want to see, I want to see Jalen. He used his legs plenty. It was design quarterback runs. He was willing to take off with the football, but it kind of just seems like I would almost like to see him do it a little bit more. Put that on tape more, and it might not necessarily be, taking off with it. Maybe it's just extending the play, giving yourself, a window to kind of see the open field, see what ends up happening, make some plays that way. The play against, or to Kendrick Law, I was talking with Nick about it earlier. To me, that was so Bryce Young-esque, and
Yes.
just the way that it looked. And if you can start getting some of that stuff where, he's extending, but defenses have to worry about that extending not being an automatic run. Like he's extending and he's looking for stuff. You have to account for so much more as a defense when a guy is willing to, still be looking for other players. And so seeing that, man, just putting that on tape, I think that's a huge deal for Alabama's offense. Makes it that much more difficult to, handle. And then, the other thing I want to see from the offense is just, and it wasn't like it's tough because it wasn't like there was a lack of consistency. It was just in a lot of situations, they were scoring so quickly that you didn't really have to worry about, sustaining drives. And, I would like to see if possible, you don't want somebody falling down, on a wide open touchdown so they keep the drive going. But yeah, I would just hope that you end up seeing some more sustained drives to see, okay, what happens when you do give, Justice Haynes, if he's playing well, 4 or 5 carries in a row, what does that look like? What does it look like, if you're giving that to Jam or, you're kind of mixing things up and getting, using Kendrick Law on a jet and throwing that into the mix. I want to see the rhythm. There was very
Yeah.
little rhythm because to a degree, everything was working after that first drive. So, you're not going to complain. I do also want to point out that the defense put the offense in a lot of favorable situations with turnovers, which is exactly what you want. So,
Right.
that's just something else I'm looking out for.
Yeah, definitely want to see some, I guess, like you said, more sustained drives, but you don't want to, relinquish those explosive plays just to have sustainable drives. So it'll be interesting to see if they can do that because I want to see Milroe and company have to convert, 3 third downs on a drive to, in the final 2 minutes of a half to score a touchdown or something, just put some pressure on the offense. The offense was not under any pressure last week against Wisconsin. I don't mean like a pressure from a quarterback standpoint. I'm talking about the offense needs to be pressured to score is what I'm saying. And you're going to get that in games, probably down the road. You got Georgia coming up in a few weeks. You got going on the road to Wisconsin. And I know you're not typically going to get that type of pressure against a Western Kentucky. We'll see what South Florida can do. But when the offense needs to put a drive together, I want to see if they can do that. Can Milroe put a drive together, a 8 to 12 play drive where he's having to pick up a couple third downs, keep the chains moving, staying ahead of the chains, like you said, having to give Justice Haynes 3 or 4 carries in a row, whatever the case is. And you mentioned that Kendrick Law play. That might be my favorite play of the game because it goes back to what you're talking about. When he steps up and it looks like he's going to run, if you go back and watch, Western Kentucky's in zone coverage, and if you pause it, the moment that Milroe takes a step forward like he's going to run it, every one of those defenders are now taking a step towards Jalen Milroe, even though they're in zone coverage. I mean, that's not their responsibility. But the threat of him running is so it puts a defense in such a bind. And you, like you said, and that's what allowed Kendrick Law to have that little bit of opening, and Milroe saw it, put it on the money, and Law, scores a touchdown. So just putting those type of plays on film, once or twice each and every week is going to make opposing defensive coordinators' heads spin. And it's just going to make this Alabama offense that much more difficult to defend because we know what Milroe can do over the top with his arm. We saw it again with Ryan Williams. We see what type of backs Alabama has with Jam Miller and Justice Haynes. And if Milroe can just continue to do those little things and just put a little bit more every week on tape for those defensive coordinators to look at, I mean, really the sky is the limit for this offense.
You want to make defensive players pay for anticipating.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is when Milroe typically, he's been one of those guys where when he gets to that point, like he did on that play, he's running it. and so defenses start to anticipate that. And when they're able to anticipate it and they're correct, you're at a disadvantage. But when they anticipate it and you don't do it, they're at a massive disadvantage. And so even just a couple of those a game, like what that does for you moving forward is when you go to take off, or, at the very least, people, defenders think you're taking off, that slight hesitation where it's like, well, I don't want to be the one responsible if I leave to take off when it's not my job, and then him pull it up and there's a guy wide open and it's my fault. So I'm going to be hesitant, even if it's just a little bit. With an athlete like Milroe, that's really all it takes for him to have a huge edge as far as running the football. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if he continues to do some things like that. The thing about Bryce is defenders they couldn't stop it anyways. It didn't really matter, at least for the most part. But when their anticipation was, well, he's not going to run it. The guy very rarely takes off with it. So when he's extending and stuff, we need to stay, hold our responsibilities. And it was like, against Georgia in the SEC championship where Bryce did run it a little bit more because Alabama was so depleted at running back. In that first half, it's like Georgia was just like, man, this guy's actually running this. Like, and so that's one, it's like the opposite for Milroe. And it made Bryce in that particular game in the second half, he didn't even have to do it because he had already made Georgia's defense respect the fact that he's willing to do it. Mm-hmm. So like, that's kind of where I really think Milroe putting more of that stuff on tape can really help Alabama's offense, and it can really help him. It's all about what do you make in defenses prepare for? And, Alabama's got a lot of different things that they can throw at you, from a personnel perspective. But now, the scheme is going to be kind of flowing with that as well. And it's going to cause a lot of problems.
Yeah. And speaking of this offense, something that we didn't see last week was Caden Proctor. And I know you've seen by now that DeBoer come out, and it seems more promising now than maybe it did, on Saturday or Sunday. Do you expect to see Caden Proctor play on Saturday? I mean, I know it's just really kind of opinion based right now because we don't know, but do you expect him to play?
I mean, I'll tell you, kind of now that it's been said, after the game, I hear, well, he could have gone and he wanted to go and they held him out for precautionary reasons. I'm like, okay, that's good news. I'm hearing, I'm not supposed to share that information, so I don't want to. And then by the next day, I was asked by a couple of people that we talk, but they're not sharing anything either. And by the next day, I'm getting messages saying that it's bad. And I don't want to say what they said that it was, but I'm like, man, did they okay? Because to me, it didn't make sense when I was told that initially. I was like, okay, then why didn't they just say that in the post game press conference? It was weird that they were kind of, Kalen DeBoer was really vague about it. And so when you get a text the next day and it says something completely different, it's like, I mean, that actually makes more sense. Maybe it was that's what they were thinking, but they were waiting to get some tests back. They wanted to be sure maybe that didn't have good news or something. So then you're like, okay, I mean, he might be out for a little while. And then you hear this, and it's like, okay, well, now we're right back where we were. I don't know where that other information came from, but it's why you don't share it. I mean, this is why you don't go out there and say, I get told stuff all the time, but I'm not going to say it until Kalen DeBoer says it, because to me, if I go out there and I say, hey, I heard that he probably could have played, then, I end up looking really, really bad if, they run some tests and then maybe that was the plan, but then something discovered, they discover something later and it looks worse. And now it's like Clint just made that up. And it's like, I didn't, but it certainly looks like I did. And so that's just, it's better to refrain from that kind of stuff. But I will say, I wouldn't be shocked at all if he did not play in this game. I will be very, very shocked if he does not play against Wisconsin. I'll put it that way. And it's not, Nick Saban's not around anymore. So I don't know that Alabama still holds these principles. Like, one of the things about Nick Saban that I don't think people ever got, like, it's when Tua Tagovailoa played against the Citadel that one year. Everybody was freaking out about it. It's like, man, just arrest the guy. And that's just not how Nick Saban operated, because you sent the message to your team, treat every opponent the same. So if you come out here and you're like, well, if this was LSU this week, Tua would be playing, but because it's the Citadel, well, we can afford to rest him. That's not sending that message. You're saying the Citadel was not LSU. So Nick Saban always struggled with that. So I don't know if I wouldn't be shocked if he sat out this week just to be 100% sure. But if they do sit him out, it's not because it's USF. I don't think. This isn't Nick Saban, but I would assume Kalen DeBoer. Most coaches want to preach kind of they don't all, practice what they preach all the time like Nick Saban did. But that is something to keep an eye on. If he doesn't play, I think it's more of, let's just make sure that our starting left tackle, who is obviously going to be a big part of what we want to do offensively this year, is, as close to 100% healthy, and he's not really having to play through anything. Because then if you can get him to that one Wisconsin game, then you got a bye week to rest him up even more. So I think just the smart thing to do would be not to play him. Get Elijah Pritchett some very important reps. Now, the problem with not playing Proctor this week is if you play him next week, it's like the first time he's played this year. And, he didn't go through the spring. So it's been a while, and now you're on the road against Wisconsin. So there's trade-offs to it. But I think the number one thing is just making sure your guy's healthy. And so, you'd hate to put him out there before he's ready. He has some kind of setback, and now it's a multi-week thing, and you got Georgia coming up, or Wisconsin, then Georgia coming up. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind with that. What about you? I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I would say that it's likely he's not going to play, and I agree with you. It has nothing to do with the opponent. I think it has to do with how much practice reps did he actually get this week, because that's important as far as game planning goes. Also, I think it's important to get another guy ready. I mean, you're one injury away from having to play somebody else, so it's good reps, good experience for Elijah Pritchett as well. So I think from more, like you said, a cautionary standpoint, and probably a lack of his, him not being able to practice probably as much as he really needs to prepare for a game this week. I would be a little bit surprised if he played against South Florida, but I'm with you. I think he's back against Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's that's exactly it right there. Is there anything else? Chance to talk about Ron Williams maybe, and just what he did. Like, I've mentioned in the snap count observations that I did over at covercrimson.com that, he was the first receiver out there with Jeremy Bernard in 2 receiver sets. Now, they obviously opened in a 3 receiver set, and Kendrick Law was in the slot with, Bernard and Williams playing outside. That first 2 receiver set, it was Williams and it was Bernard. For anybody that's down on Bernard right now, that is something to keep an eye on. I think that was just extreme, extreme circumstances. But for Ron Williams, it's like, okay, we all know we have a lot of respect for Kobe Prentice. We have a lot of respect for Kendrick Law. Cole Adams has obviously been in this conversation. Emmanuel Henderson's been in this conversation. But from game one, season opener, 17-year-old kid, and he was out there a lot. And not only did they have him out there, but and I wouldn't say that the plays were designed to go to Ron Williams, but that was one thing about Jalen Milroe is that he was going through his progressions and he was getting to Ron Williams. So that's important. But so it wasn't necessarily that Alabama was like, okay, we're going to get this kid involved. But I think he showed the coaching staff, hey, get me involved. I'm ready. I'm ready to rock and roll right now. I know I'm young, but it's kind of one of those you see it in practice and you think, okay, we think he's capable, which is why he's out there in the first place. But now he shows it to you, and now it's like, okay, we can rock and roll with this kid. And so, kind of what do you think about Ron Williams and what he did in week one and what you can expect from him in the future, near and far?
First of all, how is this kid only 17? I mean, I I don't remember a player at his age, at 17 years old, being able to come out in his first collegiate game and looking like a seasoned veteran. I mean, and it's easy to point to the 2 touchdowns he has, and the second one to me is just so impressive. His ability to make that move as soon as he catches the football to make those defenders miss and really collide into each other, which propelled him to that touchdown. I mean, it's elite. I mean, it's something you can't coach. It's not something you can teach. You either got it or you don't. And it's obvious that Ryan Williams just has that knack for big plays. And I mean, he's just going to get better and better each and every week the more time he gets on the field. I want to say this about Jeremy Bernard too, because I've had a lot of people ask me, man, what about? I thought he was going to be really good. I'm like, he played the most snaps out of any receiver. That tells you what the coaching staff thinks about him. They know he's a player. He's going to be a major factor in this offense. But I mean, Milroe only threw it 9 times. I mean, so there wasn't that many targets to go around. So, but as far as Ryan Williams goes, I don't know that you could have drew up a better start for his Alabama career, considering the expectations that came in with this kid at such a young age. He delivered, maybe even exceeded him with scoring both times he touched the ball in his Alabama debut. So the future is definitely bright for him, and I think you're going to see his snap counts. I think you're going to see his target shares. I think you're going to see all that just continue to grow and probably gradually grow as the season progresses, because this is a kid that's just going to get better and better the more snaps he takes at this level.
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure he doesn't get overwhelmed. But it's like, you see last week and you're like, okay, we can push him a little more. We can do a little more. And then if he handles that well, okay, we can do a little more. Exactly. And so that's where the progression, I think, comes in for sure. And I think that he just, I don't know. We'll find out more. You go to Madison, Wisconsin, the caliber of player you're going against is going to be different. I think that's kind of, no offense to USF, but I think that's really where you're going to see it. And just, where he's at, if he's doing these things to, and I understand Wisconsin, I haven't really looked a ton into their cornerback room, but I just highly doubt that they possess the caliber of guys that, he's going to be going against, some weeks in the SEC, but at least going on the road in that moment, if he can prove capable in that situation, it's like, man, I just don't think there's going to be a scenario where, like anybody else, if you're going against an elite corner, you're not going to get as many wins or have as much success. But as long as, he's kind of getting his fair share of wins against those styles of player or in those situations, it's like, okay, I mean, this kid can handle it all. Just go ahead and, let him be him and let him be great. Jalen Milroe, with what he likes to do as far as pressing the ball downfield, Ron Williams is like the perfect guy for that. He's just, I don't know that Alabama's had this caliber of vertical threat in at least since JMO. And Jermaine Burton, he certainly could do a lot of that. I think he was very underrated as far as his ability to win downfield. I think he's going to do it in the NFL too. But just the danger that Ryan Williams, it's kind of like Jalen Hyatt. We were talking about Tennessee earlier. just that threat. I mean, it's like, man, you're struggling to decide, okay, what do we do? Tennessee's running the football really well, but this guy, I mean, if we have DeMarco Hellams cheat up 1 or 2 steps, that's all it takes for this guy. So
Right.
what do we do? And you're trying to figure it out. You got the best defensive mind, or one of the best defensive mind ever in college football, and Nick Saban trying to figure out. You got Pete Golding, who many Alabama fans would argue is the exact opposite of that, but it doesn't matter. He was, Nick Saban was a part of that brain trust. They're trying to figure out, how do we stop this, this combination. That's the kind of thing that Brian Williams will bring to the table to this offense, especially if Alabama's able to run the football like we think they can with Justice Haynes and Jam Miller. Stacey, is there anything else that you want to add before we hop out of here, brother?
I don't think so. Just excited to see more of what this team can do. And like we talked about offensively, if the situation presents itself, can this offense, put together those 8 to 12 play drives, sustain drives, convert on third downs? Can Milroe continue to grow and just like you talked about, put more stuff on film for those defensive coordinators to think about? Because he could, if he continues to do that, this offense can be lethal because there's playmakers all over the field.
That's a good way to wrap it up right there. All right. We appreciate everybody who's listened in. If you haven't already, like this video, share this video wherever you share it. We certainly appreciate it. We love getting the word out. We love being able to do these, and the more the success that it has, the more we'll do them. And certainly subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps us more than anything. And turn the notification bell on, and that way you get a update or a notification every time we go live or every time we post a video. You'll be one of the first to be able to see it. And then if you haven't already, go subscribe to covercrimson.com. It's only $1 for a month. My snap count observations are over there. Stacey was giving a USF preview over there, talking a little bit about them. He's going to be adding some stuff to that as he continues to watch more throughout this week. I'll certainly be doing the same. That's going to be very informative, an informative thread by the end of this. And then I'll also be doing some players to watch, some matchups, and I'll be posting that over at covercrimson.com as well. So if you haven't already, go subscribe. It's only $1 for the first month. Stacey, as always, brother, I appreciate you, and we'll do this again soon.
All right, buddy.